This week on The Inside Story, the Israel-Hamas conflict expands its scope as Iranian missiles and drones are intercepted, and the Israeli cabinet debates its response. In Nigeria, 10 years after hundreds of girls were kidnapped by Boko Haram extremists, the fate of 82 remain unknown, and kidnappings continue. Plus, history is made in New York City as former President Donald Trump sits for the first of 4 criminal trials scheduled to begin during his campaign for the U.S. presidency. Now, on The Inside Story, Mideast tensions.
Welcome to The Inside Story. I'm Carla Babb. World leaders are calling for restraint after Iran and its proxies launched more than 300 missiles and drones toward Israel on April 13th and 14th. Western officials say the attack was an Iranian failure, as it failed to cause significant injuries or damage. The attack came less than 2 weeks after an Israeli strike in Syria killed 13 people, including at least 3 senior Iranian commanders. WEWE's Arash Arabasadi has more.
A barrage of objects streaks across the night sky from Bethlehem in the West Bank amid drone and missile attacks from Iran toward Israel. The Israeli military says the Islamic Republic launched more than 300 such projectiles, but said it, with help from the U.S. and partners, shot down 99% of them. Iran has warned it would hit Israel in retaliation after a suspected Israeli airstrike earlier this month destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, Syria, killing 12, including 2 top Iranian generals. U.S. President Joe Biden issued a statement on X, formerly Twitter, confirming U.S. involvement in the operation and reaffirming what he calls America's ironclad commitment to the security of Israel. His presumptive opponent for the 2024 presidential election, former President Donald Trump, took to his social media platform to say without evidence the attack would never have happened if he were president. By all accounts, the damage inside Israel was minimal, something Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir-Abdollahian describes as deliberate. At a recent news conference in Tehran, he said Iran communicated the attack to the White House and regional neighbors in what he called a legitimate defense and punishment of the Israeli regime. But by Sunday morning, Biden administration officials took a victory lap for the coordinated defense against Iran's barrage.
Truly a successful night, and due to a lot of skill, a lot of professionalism, and a lot of coordination across the board. Israel succeeded in defending itself, and the United States certainly made good our commitment to help them do that.
U.S. lawmakers supporting Israel's self-defense rejected the idea of a broadening regional conflict that would include American soldiers.
I don't think at this point that the United States should be engaged in a military action directly at Iran, but I do believe that if this administration fails to step up to the plate and understand that we have an escalating conflict and make it clear to Iran that there are red lines and that the United States will defend Israel and will not allow Iran to become a weapon state, that we will be in a broader conflict and we will have less options.
Video from Iran after the attack shows people celebrating in Tehran, waving both Iranian and Palestinian flags as their country's leadership vows ongoing solidarity with Palestinians amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News.
Here's how officials say the attack unfolded. Between April 13th and 14th, Iran and its proxies launched more than 150 drones and about 150 missiles from Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen toward Israel over the span of several hours. Israel's Iron Dome air defense system staved off the missile attacks. Jordanian aircraft shot down drones coming through its skies as U.S. forces shot down more than 80 of those drones and 6 missiles. The UK and France also shot down an unspecified number of aerial threats. Saudi Arabia and the UAE provided intel to the coalition. Officials say none of the drones survived this defense, and only about 5 missiles made it through, causing little damage. So little damage that there is some pressure from inside and outside Israel, suggesting no response to the attack is necessary and could prolong attempts to get Israeli hostages home. But many Israelis say something must be done to preserve the idea that Israel always responds. Linda Gradstein reports.
Iran's attack with hundreds of missiles fired simultaneously was unprecedented. So was the international cooperation to intercept them, with the U.S., Jordan, and Britain working together, say Israeli security officials. As the international community urges restraint, some in Israel say the Jewish state must respond.
I think that we cannot leave this open file without some retaliation. But the kind of retaliation is going to be measured in the sense that Israel doesn't want to lead to a regional war.
Israeli media reports say 2 former chiefs of staff in the war cabinet, Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot, wanted to strike back at Iran while the Iranian attack was underway, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said no. Other Israeli intelligence analysts say the damage was limited and Israel can choose not to respond further.
I'm sure Israel will be able in the future to retaliate in Iran in a different way. We have a lot of capabilities, and I think it will be much more devastating for the Iranians if Israel succeeded, and Israel has to contribute to that in order that it will work, succeed to change the architecture of the Middle East in a way that will be understood that Iran is with its proxies, but all the others are actually cooperating against Iran and its proxies.
Iran's attack came as Israel is under growing international criticism for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza that has left hundreds of thousands of Palestinians facing famine. The U.S. has been pushing Israel to accept a ceasefire that would lead to freedom for the remaining 129 Israeli hostages that Hamas militants took hostage on October 7, although it's not clear how many are still alive. There is concern in Israel that retaliating against Iran could lead to even more pressure on Israel to withdraw from Gaza before it has reached its goals. Linda Gradstein, VOA News, Jerusalem.
Amidst the Iranian and Israeli back and forth, the Iraqi Prime Minister was in the U.S. this week for talks with President Biden. The country, so long a focus of U.S. policy in the Middle East, now finds itself stuck in the middle, both geographically and diplomatically, in the long-running conflict between Iran and Israel. Anita Powell reports.
Iraq's leader already had lots of ground to cover with President Joe Biden before this weekend's stunning Iranian attack on Israel raised fears of a wider regional war. Even though the U.S. is describing the aerial assault as a failure, Iraq's leader acknowledged that the conflict between Israel and Hamas is a major concern in the region.
We are actually very eager about stopping this war, which claimed the lives of thousands of civilians, women, and children. And we encourage all the efforts about stopping the expansion of the area of conflict.
The two nations have a delicate relationship after decades of U.S. military involvement in Iraq. U.S. anti-aircraft assets in northern Iraq were used to shoot down some of the Iranian missiles. Biden said Iraq, a longtime adversary of Iran, has a role to play in maintaining peace.
Simply put, our partnership is pivotal for our nations, for the Middle East, and I believe for the world.
Earlier Monday, al-Sudani's deputy met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and both hailed the regional cooperation that thwarted the attack and urged de-escalation.
And I think what this weekend demonstrated is that Israel did not have to and does not have to defend itself alone when it is the victim of an aggression, the victim of an attack. In the 36 hours since, we have been coordinating a diplomatic response to seek to prevent escalation. Strength and wisdom need to be the same sides, the different sides of the same coin.
We call on all parties for self-restraint and respect the rules and also international norms that we set.
والاتفاقيات الدولية المنظمة لذلك.
No major bilateral moves were announced Monday, but analysts say there are things Iraqi leadership can do.
Iraq needs to make its preference for reduced escalation clear, and that's both talking to the Iranians, but also talking to other Arab states and talking to the United States that this is negative from Iraq's point of view, and that it wants all the powers to take responsible action to try to reduce escalation.
As Israel mulls its response, regional actors are not sitting still. On Monday, Iraq's president met with the King of Jordan. According to Jordan's royal court, they spoke about the dangers of this conflict escalating further. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting on that attack, where UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres condemned the aerial assault and called for a de-escalation of the conflict.
The Middle East is on the brink. The people of the region are confronting a real danger of a devastating, full-scale conflict. Now is the time to defuse and de-escalate. Now is the time for maximum restraint. I strongly condemn the serious escalation represented by the large-scale attack launched on Israel by the Islamic Republic of Iran this evening, and I call for an immediate cessation of these hostilities. It's vital to avoid any action that could lead to major military confrontations on multiple fronts in the Middle East. Civilians are already bearing the brunt and paying the highest price. And we have a shared responsibility to actively engage all parties concerned to prevent further escalation. We have a shared responsibility to secure an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages, and the unimpeded delivery of humanitarian aid. We have a shared responsibility to stop violence in the occupied West Bank, de-escalate the situation along the Blue Line, and re-establish safe navigation in the Red Sea. We have a shared responsibility to work for peace. Regional and indeed global peace and security are being undermined by the hour. Neither the region nor the world can afford more war. Thank you.
U.S. presidential candidates Joe Biden and Donald Trump are both supporting Israel in the war in Gaza and its hostilities with Iran. VOA correspondent Scott Stearns reports on how events in the Middle East are shaping U.S. politics.
Iran's attack on Israel and America's role in the Middle East as issues in this U.S. presidential campaign are a contest over which candidate backs Israel most. As incumbent, President Joe Biden oversaw the U.S. response to the attack and reaffirmed U.S. support for Israel in a meeting with the Iraqi Prime Minister.
The United States is committed to Israel's security. We're committed to a ceasefire that will bring the hostages home and preventing conflict from spreading beyond what it already has. We're also committed to the security of our personnel and partners in the region, including Iraq.
Politically, Biden is facing competing calls to do more to help secure the release of hostages held by Hamas and to get tougher with Israel over its attacks in Gaza. His opponent, Donald Trump, says none of the violence in the Middle East would have happened if he were still president, without explaining how.
I want to say God bless the people of Israel. They're under attack right now. That's because we show great weakness. This would not happen. The weakness that we've shown is unbelievable, and it would not have happened if we were in office. You know that. They know that. Everybody knows that.
The Trump campaign is working to portray Biden as weak on Israel on Trump's social media platform and through Republican lawmakers, including House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Joe Biden has transformed into an anti-Israel president. There's really no other way to characterize it. He's more concerned, seemingly, with placating the anti-Semitism in his base than standing with our historic and vitally important ally.
In the Midwestern state of Michigan, voter Carol Plissner says Biden needs to keep up his support for Israel.
I think initially President Biden's response to the situation was helpful and it was supportive. I think as time has gone on, that's become more questionable. And I think I think that the United States needs to have a stance that's deeply protective of democracy across the world. And that means deeply respectful of Israel.
Biden's support for Israel in Gaza is reason to oppose him, says Michigan voter Mohammed Mauri.
He's complicit in a catastrophe that's happening 1,000 miles away. People think that it's not hurting us, but it is. We're aiding it with our money.
Polling by Pew Research last month showed deep divides on the issue, with about 20% of U.S. voters saying Biden's striking the right balance, another 20% saying he's favoring Israel, and 16% saying he's favoring Palestinians. The largest group in that poll was not sure how well Biden's handling the issue. Scott Stearns, VOA News.
We head now to Africa, where 10 years ago, the Islamist terror group Boko Haram abducted hundreds of schoolgirls. Many escaped or gained freedom through negotiations. But the fate of 82 girls hangs on the hope of reviving a once vibrant advocacy group. The Bring Back Our Girls, or BBOG group, dominated global headlines after the 2014 abduction. In the decades since the raid, mass abductions have become frequent, and activists have grown weary. We get more from Timothy Obiezu in Abuja.
This public park was once a symbol of hope and resilience, but now it holds memories of a struggle to save 82 schoolgirls still in captivity from the 276 kidnapped by Boko Haram on April 14, 2014 from Chibok Secondary School. One of them is Nkeki Muta's niece.
Every day, in the morning, in the afternoon, we feel pain about this because of the absence of this our niece. We heard that some were dead, and that is one of the things that we are advocating. If government can be kind enough to tell us or to release all the names of those that are dead, so that we can forget about it.
Days following the kidnappings, activists coalesced and started the Bring Back Our Girls, or BBOG movement, demanding their rescue. Back then, the group met here daily, and their campaign sparked global outrage, but not anymore.
There is fatigue in the struggle. When the Bring Back Our Girls started and it was gaining traction globally, there are a lot of responses from even foreign governments ready to support Nigeria.
So far, 194 girls have returned, either by escaping or they were freed through government negotiations. But the threat of mass kidnapping remains. Amnesty International says Nigeria has recorded 17 cases in which at least 1,700 children were seized from schools since Chibok. Recent attacks have been perpetrated by armed gangs known as bandits. The gangs often demand huge ransoms to free their captives. Nigerian authorities say they have not forgotten those in captivity.
If it was we're using the conventional method of fighting, we will have entered all the communities and flattened everything to start all over. But we can't do that because we know there are no state actors holding other people against their will. So we have to be very deliberate. There are instances where we've gone for attack because civilians were there, we call off the strike.
Families and BBOG activists disagree. They say authorities have not shown the political will to address the problem. On Sunday, they remembered the girls on the 10th year anniversary of their abduction.
Unfortunately, the Chibok girls' abduction was only the beginning of countless abductions that have led to a thriving abduction industry in our nation, since the government have refused to bring the perpetrators of the abduction of our Chibok girls to book.
Sadly, you could even see people that are supposed to take the necessary action, especially the security agencies, providing excuses for what happened, that the children have been taken to a difficult terrain to be accessed. If the terrorists can access a difficult terrain, what more of our security forces?
Until the girls are freed, many like Muta will be waiting for some sense of closure. Timothy Obiezu, VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
A private high school in California is providing scholarships to 3 refugee students from Ukraine and Afghanistan. VOA's Jenya Dulo has the story of an American educator who has opened her home to two of them as they complete their studies.
High school student Yeva Cherkasova-Shekera was studying in Kiev when Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022.
I would never think that I would really experience war, all these bombs, which I really witnessed.
When the women in her family fled to Poland, she reached out to High Bluff Academy here in San Diego, California, and got a full scholarship.
After all these inhumane things, coming here and seeing that people here want to embrace me with their hearts and all the kindness they give me, I think this is a big thing to always remember, that there should always be faith for better.
School founder Jill Duto sent the teen airline tickets and is paying for her education here.
I've always wanted to help. There's so many people in need. It's where do you start?
About 1/3 of the students here are international. Duto is also collaborating with a learning center in Afghanistan to help Afghan girls complete their studies online and receive high school diplomas from High Bluff Academy so they can apply to universities abroad. Jenya Dulo, VOA News, San Diego, California.
Now our weekly look at the U.S. presidential election. We head to a New York City courtroom for a historic first. A criminal trial of a former U.S. president finally got underway this week. The trial is the first of 4 different criminal trials scheduled during the ramp-up to the November elections. Aaron Rainan has more.
Donald Trump is forced to leave the presidential campaign trail and take a seat in the courtroom yet again. The former president faces criminal charges related to a $130,000 payment from his attorney Michael Cohen to a former porn star Stormy Daniels shortly before the 2016 election. The prosecutors argue the payment was made to silence her about an alleged sexual encounter with Trump, who was married at the time. He is accused of falsely categorizing these payments as legal expenses in his financial reports.
Under New York state law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are.
Trump has pleaded not guilty to all charges and claims this is a politically motivated case.
It's a shame. It's a shame what's happening to our country. This is election interference. They are doing things that have never been done in this country before.
Trump's return to the courtroom has stirred fresh debate among New Yorkers, with opinions sharply divided on the upcoming trial.
President Trump is a citizen just like everyone else, or a resident just like everyone else in the United States. He's subject to the same laws and responsibilities as we all are.
Actually, nobody else would have been charged. It's only Trump that's getting charged for something that never happened.
Former New York City prosecutor Bernarda Villalona says Trump faces 34 counts of falsifying business records.
He faces a maximum of 4 years in jail per count. But also, there's no mandatory minimums. Will he go to jail here in New York State? I highly doubt it, that even with going to trial, that a judge will sentence him to jail.
New York University law professor Richard Pildes says this trial is historic.
It's certainly unprecedented in American history for a former president to be criminally prosecuted. There have been prosecutions, successful criminal prosecutions in some countries of former prime ministers. So it's not unprecedented in a kind of a global perspective, but certainly in the United States, we've never been in a situation like this before.
As the former president mounts his defense against these charges, observers watch and await the outcome. Aaron Rainan, VOA News, New York City.
Stay up to date with all the latest news at voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News. Follow me on Twitter at CarlaBabVOA. And catch up on past episodes at our free streaming service, VOA Plus. For all of those behind the scenes who brought you today's show, I'm Carla Babb. We'll see you next week for The Inside Story.